In a town silenced by despair, one unexpected melody could change everything. Prepare to witness the extraordinary power of music and community, proving it's never too late to find your voice and heal a broken heart. She was one of the most powerful EOs in New York. But when her twin daughters were declared beyond saving all the money in the world, couldn't bring them back until a janitor, a broken single father with a hidden past, walked into their hospital room and played a melody that made time stand still. This isn't just a story about miracles, it's about love loss and how the most sacred gifts often come from those we least expect. If you believe in the power of kindness, second chances, and stories that heal the soul, we'd love to have you with us. Please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this journey with someone who still believes in hope. The scent of bleach and lemon cleaner clung to the air long after the lights dimmed in Millbridge Memorial Hospital's West Wing. At 2:12 a.m., the hallways were nearly silent, except for the soft squeak of rubber soles and the occasional metallic clink of a mop bucket rolling over cracked linoleum. Beau Callahan preferred it this way, with his head slightly bowed and a faded navy cap pulled low over his brow. Beau moved like a ghost between rooms. His janitor's apron was wrinkled from a long shift, and the keys clipped to his belt jangled softly with each step. He stopped at room 417, glanced through the window, and took a slow breath. Inside, twin hospital beds sat side by side, cradling two fragile forms. 6-year-old girls, pale as porcelain, with matching oxygen tubes and identical of drips. One of them twitched faintly in her sleep, the other lay motionless, her tiny chest barely rising. The nameplate read, Layla Quinn and Lucy Quinn, daughters of Mavi Quinn, CEO of Quindex Solutions. Everyone in the hospital knew of Mavi Quinn. Brilliant, untouchable, icy, she'd built a tech empire from scratch by 30. But over the last week, all her power had been useless against what had struck her daughters. A rare viral complication that had left doctors baffled and equipment blinking in futility. They had tried everything and failed. Beau didn't knock. He never did. He just stood quietly looking through the glass. Something in his chest tugged. Gently, he slid his hand into the pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out the old silver harmonica he never went anywhere without. He hadn't played it in years. Down the hall, Nurse Brenda Hayes leaned over the station desk, watching him with quiet curiosity. That janitor again, she muttered to herself, shaking her head, always pausing at 417. From the shadowed hallway behind her, a voice answered coldly, "He's distracting my staff." Brenda turned. "Miss Quinn." "I mean, no, he's just maybe." Quinn stood like a porcelain statue in a white silk blouse and tailored black slacks, not a hair out of place, despite having slept in that same chair outside AU for 3 nights straight. Her hazel eyes were sharp, but beneath them were dark crescent that betrayed sleeplessness, heartbreak, and something darker, fury. She stepped past Brenda without another word and marched straight toward room 417. He was still standing there when Mavi arrived. She didn't speak. She didn't ask who he was. She simply looked at the harmonica in his hand and snapped. "What do you think you're doing?" Beau turned calm. "Just remembering." "Remember somewhere else," she hissed. "You're not here to stand around and stare." He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." He pocketed the harmonica and turned away. But just before he pushed the mop forward again, he hesitated. Quietly, he said, "I had a daughter once about their age. Used to fall asleep to this harmonica every night." Mavi's jaw clenched. Her voice, barely above a whisper now, was laced with exhaustion. "Well, my daughters aren't falling asleep. They're not waking up either. So unless that toy of yours can perform miracles, move along." Beau didn't reply. He just gave her a soft look, respectful yet piercing. Then, without another word, he walked away. Later that night, long after even the nurses had dozed at their stations, a faint sound threaded through the hallway air, soft, trembling like wind drifting across a canyon. The harmonica. It wasn't loud, it wasn't perfect, but it was alive. He sat in the dark corner of the corridor just beyond the 2 doors. Eyes closed, hands steady, the silver harmonica gleamed in the low light. And from room 417, a subtle change so slight it would have been missed occurred. Lucy Quinn's tiny hand twitched, her eyelashes fluttered for half a second, then stilled. The next morning, the doctor saw the vitals, but dismissed it as coincidence. One blip among thousands. But Nurse Brenda noticed something else, for the first time in days. Maybe Quinn didn't pace. She just sat still, staring at her daughters with an odd look on her face. Later, as Brenda passed by with Beau's mop bucket, she whispered, "That tune you played, what was it?" Beau looked up, his voice a rough whisper. "It's called Hope's Lullaby. Wrote it for my little girl the week before we buried her." Brenda blinked. "You lost a daughter." He nodded once. "Lung failure. Nothing we could do." But she smiled. "The night I played that song. That's the last thing I remember." Brenda's eyes softened. "And you think what? That it could help someone else's little girl?" Smile again. Beau didn't answer. He just turned back toward room 417, and for the first time, he stepped closer. Mavi Quinn didn't believe in miracles. Not anymore. She had once believed in numbers, in performance graphs and predictive algorithms, in controlling risk. That belief had taken her from a foster home in East St. Lewis to the helm of Quintich, a billion-dollar healthcare technology company, now used in over 400 hospitals nationwide, but nothing in her software could explain why Leia hadn't spoken in 4 days, or why Lucy's brain scans looked like static on a broken television screen, or why their tiny fingers, once warm and always grasping hers, now lay cold against bleached hospital sheets. No calculation could undo this kind of silence. That morning, after catching the janitor, what was his name again? Brad Ben, standing outside her daughter's room. She sat by their bedsides with her arms folded, staring at them like they might evaporate if she blinked. The room was awash in sterile light. Machines beeped rhythmically too steadily, like death was being kept on a leash. Nurses came and went. No one made eye contact. She hadn't slept. Not really, not since they collapsed 5 days ago during their sleepover with Grandma. The diagnosis had come too late. A rare viral encephalitis, rapid onset, resistant to antivirals, twin immune systems fighting 2 losing battles. The irony made her sick. A woman who built her empire around early detection and remote diagnostics, watching her own daughter slip away before her eyes. Around noon, Dr. Patel entered with her usual brisk efficiency. Mavi rose from her seat like a soldier awaiting bad news. Vitals remain stable for now, the doctor said, eyes flicking to the chart. No improvement, but no decline overnight either. Statistically, Mavi said flatly. Is that meaningful? Patel hesitated. Not statistically, but we'll take what we can get. She didn't say it, but Mavi heard it anyway. We're out of options. After Dr. Patel left, May noticed a small folded piece of paper tucked just beneath Lucy's pillow. Frowning, she pulled it out. It was written in pencil on yellowing notebook paper, the kind that curled at the edges and felt soft from years of handling. Hope's lullaby for Leia and Lucy in memory of my Ellie. Beneath the title were handwritten lyrics, soft and simple, about a night sky, a silver breeze, a song for angels. At the very bottom, barely visible, were 3 initials, B. Bulletin. The janitor, Mavi, stormed out of the room. She found him in the lower corridor pushing a mop across the tiled floor with slow, deliberate strokes. His apron was stained, his flannel rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms marked with faint burns. Old ones healed long ago. You left this, she snapped, holding up the paper like it was evidence in a trial. He paused, but didn't flinch. Yes, ma'am. I figured if I couldn't be of help, maybe the song could help. Her voice cracked halfway between rage and exhaustion. You think a song will fix this? You think scribbled lyrics can fight viral encephalitis? B looked at her, not with challenge, but with understanding. It was the kind of look you only learn after burying someone you loved. No, ma'am, he said softly. I think love can, and sometimes love wears the shape of music. Mai stared at him, thrown by the simplicity of his answer. Then, as if the conversation had never happened, he turned back to mopping. That night, Mavi didn't leave the hospital. She sat alone in the parents' lounge sipping hospital coffee gone cold. The television in the corner flickered images of war election debates, celebrity scandals. None of it felt real. What was real was 2 hospital beds, 2 little girls in identical gowns, and a man in a janitor's uniform playing a harmonica so gently you could almost believe he was coaxing something back from the other side. V took the folded lyrics from her purse and read them again. Something about them felt unfinished, like they were missing a second verse, like they were waiting for someone else to write the rest. The next day, Brenda caught Beau outside the cafeteria. Maybe Quinn asked about you, she said, handing him a coffee. Beau raised a brow. Didn't expect that. She read your song, Brenda added. She's different today, quieter, not as sharp around the edges. Beau didn't say anything. He never took credit for healing anything. But that afternoon, as he passed by room 417 again, something had changed. The door was open, and Mavi was sitting on the windowsill, holding Lucy's tiny hand in both of hers, whispering something under her breath. She looked up at Beau, not with contempt, but with curiosity. For the first time, she asked him a question. Tell me about your daughter. Beau leaned quietly against the doorframe. He didn't step in. He didn't want to intrude, but his voice was steady. Her name was Ellie, 7 years old, loved fireflies, hated peas, got real sick real fast. I tried everything, but in the end, all I had was a harmonica and a promise I'd keep playing for her. Maybe looked at him like he had said something sacred. I didn't believe in music, she said softly, or people or hope. I believed in control, in managing outcomes. Beau nodded once. How's that working out for you? There was no malice in his voice, just truth, and for the first time since her world shattered, maybe Quinn let out something between a breath and a laugh. The kind that hurt on the way out but felt real. That night, as the sun disappeared behind the glass tower of Quint, visible from the hospital window, Mavi stood at her daughter's bedside, holding the folded lyrics like a prayer. Be played again in the hallway just out of sight, and in the soft glow of the monitors, Clea stirred, not much, but enough to make Maeve whisper, play it again. The third night was the quietest. Not because the machines had stopped beeping, not because the nurses had stopped whispering behind clipboards, But because something had shifted, something invisible, yet undeniable, the hallway outside room 417 no longer felt like a war zone. It felt like a chapel. Mavi sat by Clay's bedside, the dim light from the hallway pooling just enough to reveal the soft outline of her daughter's faces. Lucy's fingers had curled slightly around her blanket in her sleep. Leia's lips twitched faintly, neither a frown nor a smile, just movement. To anyone else, it would have seemed insignificant, but to a mother on the edge, it was everything. Down the corridor, Beau Callahan sat on the bench beside the vending machines. His back to the wall, harmonica cradled between both palms. He hadn't played yet tonight. He was waiting for the silence to settle, the kind of silence that invites music and not drowns it out. A nurse passed by and nodded. Beau gave a small wave, then closed his eyes. He raised the harmonica and began. It wasn't a loud melody. It never was, but the sound traveled. It crept down the hallway like incense in a cathedral, drifting past surgical wings and break rooms into places sterile and forgotten. It danced softly around corners and seeped through thin doorways. In room 417, it arrived like a whisper from another life. Mavi looked up from her chair. She didn't cry this time. She didn't scowl. She didn't even move. She just listened, and so did her daughters. Lucy's head tilted slightly toward the sound. Leia's eyelids fluttered once, twice, then rested. Mavi leaned forward, stunned. "Girls," she whispered. No response, but the air felt lighter, and in that stillness, for the first time since this nightmare began, Mavi didn't feel like the only person in the world fighting for her daughters. Someone else was there too. A man with no title, no degree, no white coat, just a song. At 6:42 a.m., the shift changed. The hallways filled with fresher robes and stronger coffee. Doctors murmured, morning updates. Nurses reset monitors. Life resumed in its usual controlled chaos. Beau was gone as usual. He always disappeared before the sun rose. But his music lingered, and so did something else. Dr. Patel arrived with her usual clipboard and professional detachment, but paused when she saw Mavi already awake and alert at her daughter's bedside. "You look rested," the doctor said, surprised. "I'm not," Mavi replied. "But I feel clearer." Patel checked vitals, reviewed overnight logs, then blinked at a screen. "That's odd." Lucy's heart rhythm stabilized considerably overnight. No spikes, no erratic drops. Mavi's voice was quiet, but steady. "What does that mean?" "It means the body is trying again." Patel tapped her pen against the screen. "It's not recovery. Not yet. But it's different." Later that afternoon, as the hospital settled into its late-day hum, Mavi stood outside the janitor's closet near the maintenance wing. She didn't knock. She just waited. Eventually, the door creaked open and B stepped out, still wearing his apron, a smudge of oil on one hand. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked. Mavi held up a small navy blue velvet box. "I found this in my glove compartment." She said it belonged to their father. He played the guitar badly. Her mouth curved just slightly. Inside is a thumb pick and a folded chord sheet from the first song he wrote for the girls. B said nothing. "I thought maybe music finds the people it needs." Maybe continued. "And maybe that song you played, it didn't just come from you. Maybe you were supposed to be here." Beau looked down at the box. "I'm not a healer," he said. "I just play what I can't say." That's exactly why it works. That evening, Mavi made a decision she hadn't made in 5 days. She went home only for a few hours, just enough to shower, change clothes, breathe something that didn't smell like antiseptic. The apartment was too clean, too quiet. A photograph of the girls with their father sat framed on the piano in the living room. She walked over to it. Her fingers hovered above the keys. She hadn't played since his funeral. She sat down uncertain. Her hands trembled over middle C, and slowly she began to play. The first notes were broken, stiff. Then one of Bose's melodies floated to her memory. She tried to follow it. By the third bar, her fingers steadied. By the sixth, she was crying, but she didn't stop playing. Back at the hospital, B stood outside room 417C, looking in. He wasn't holding the harmonica tonight. Instead, he held the velvet box Mavi had given him. He took out the chord sheet and read it slowly, mouthing the lyrics. Then, with a sigh so deep it shook something old in him, he stepped into the room for the first time. The girls lay sleeping, their monitors softly blinking. He didn't play. He didn't speak. He just sat in the chair next to them and watched. And in that silence, he made a quiet promise. "I'll play for you when the world forgets. I'll be the sound that stays when the doctors walk away. I'll be the song your souls remember, even if your hearts forget how to beat." The rain had started sometime around midnight, soft at first, just a misty tapping on the windows of Millbridge Memorial Hospital. Then it deepened into something steadier, a quiet percussion that filled the silent halls like a soundtrack to the fragile hope growing in room 417. Beau Callahan listened to it as he sat beside Leia and Lucy, one hand resting gently on the edge of Lucy's blanket. He didn't speak. He never did in their presence, but every breath he took was quiet and steady, like he didn't want to startle the souls that were still deciding whether or not to stay. Outside the room, Mavi stood watching him through the half-open door. She hadn't meant to arrive this early, but sleep was still foreign. and the condo too loud in its silence, so she came back before sunrise, expecting to be alone. But B was already there again, not just standing in the hallway with his mop like the first time. This time he was inside. It didn't alarm her. It didn't even surprise her. She simply stood there for a while watching this quiet man, this janitor, this stranger sit beside her daughters with more stillness and reverence than most priests she'd known. There was something ancient in the way he kept vigil, like he'd done this before. She stepped in softly, not wanting to break whatever spell held the room together. "You come earlier every day," she said gently. B looked up, offered a half smile. "Not sure I ever leave, really." She pulled the chair on the other side of Lucy's bed and sat down. "Were you always like this?" He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Calm, still, like you've already seen the end and just made peace with it." B stared her at the heart monitor's gentle pulse before answering. "I used to be all fire. Loud, moved fast, saved people for a living. Then one day, I couldn't, and after that all the noise in me got real quiet." Mavi's voice dropped. "Your daughter?" He nodded once. "She was 7. Ellie, yeah, had a laugh that could break glass." He chuckled softly, then looked down. "I still hear it sometimes, usually in dreams I don't remember. After I wake up." My traced a slow circle on the metal bed rail with her finger. "I don't dream anymore, you will?" A nurse entered with fresh charts, startled slightly at seeing them both there. "Oh, sorry," she said quickly, backing out. "It's okay," Mavi said. "We were just sitting." The nurse hesitated. "Actually, I wanted to tell you something about Lucy." Mavi stood immediately. "What is it?" "Nothing bad," the nurse assured. "Actually, her reflexes responded to a light test this morning, slightly. But it's the first measurable sign in 3 days." Mavi blinked. She responded, "Yes, small but real." Bao didn't move, but he smiled. "A real one this time, like someone had lit a match in a long, dark room." After the nurse left, Mavi sat down again. Silence filled the room once more. But it felt different now. Less like absence, more like waiting. "You don't talk about her much, do you?" Mavi asked. "Not unless someone asks." "Did she pass here in this hospital?" Bo shook his head. "Different town, different life. She was sick for a while. My wife Rachel stayed by her side every night. I was still active duty. Couldn't always be there." He paused, his voice thickening. "I promised I'd be home for her last week. But a deployment got extended. I made it back the night after Ellie died." Mav inhaled, pain threading through her chest. Not pity, but recognition. She too had missed moments that could never be recovered. "What happened to your wife?" she asked. B looked away. "She didn't survive the grief." Mai closed her eyes. "And for the first time since this nightmare began," she whispered, "I'm sorry." Bo didn't respond, but the stillness between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was sacred. Two people sitting in the ruins of things they couldn't fix and still choosing to breathe. That afternoon, something extraordinary happened. Glea laughed. It was faint, a breathy little puff of sound. But Mai, who had been reading aloud from their favorite fairy tale, heard it clearly. She froze, staring down at her daughter's face. Lea's eyelids twitched, her lips parted slightly, and she whispered one word. "Mommy." Mavi nearly collapsed to the floor. Tears rushed to her eyes. Her breath catching like a dam breaking open, she called for the nurses. For Dr. Patel, for anyone. Machines were checked, reflexes tested, questions asked. And all the while, Leia lay there blinking, a ghost of her old smile playing on her lips. "She's coming back to us," Dr. Patel murmured, amazed. "And maybe." She just kept holding Sila's hand, whispering, "Thank you," over and over. Though she wasn't sure who she was thanking. That night, the hospital was buzzing with quiet hope. Staff smiled behind their masks. Brenda brought extra coffee to room 417. Dr. Patel stayed longer than usual, but Mavi waited until nearly midnight to find Bao again. He was sitting in the chapel this time, an old wooden pew beneath a stained glass window that caught the moonlight just enough to color his flannel shirt in blues and golds. She sat beside him. She said, "Mommy, today," Mai whispered. Bao didn't look at her. "I know, Brenda told me. I didn't think I'd ever hear her voice again." Bo finally turned. "That song you played on your piano, did it belong to your husband?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He wrote it the day we found out we were having twins. I never liked it, thought it was too soft, too sentimental. But you played it anyway." "I did," she admitted, "last night. First time since his funeral." Bo leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Funny thing about music. It never demands anything from us. It just waits until we're ready to feel again." Mai's voice cracked. "I'm tired of feeling nothing." Then let the silence end. And in the hush of that little chapel beneath the sky, she couldn't see, Mavi reached into her coat pocket and handed B the folded music sheet from home. "Add a verse," she whispered. "Make it ours." The fifth night came colder than the ones before. Outside the hospital windows, wind clawed at the glass with the dry insistence of late October. The trees along the parking lot had begun to strip bare their branches, skeletal against the gray sky. And somewhere deep inside Millbridge Memorial, in a room where hope had begun to flicker again, the air turned still once more. Leia had spoken the night before. A single word, a miracle. But miracles, as maybe Quinn was learning, don't come in straight lines. Lucy's oxygen saturation dropped just after 9 servo p.m. Mava had been brushing Leia's hair. humming a melody that now came naturally, an echo of the lullaby Beau had played the night before. Then suddenly Lucy's monitor erupted into a shrill, stuttering alarm. Mavi's world snapped. Nurses flooded in. Dr. Patel was called. An oxygen mask was fitted tighter around Lucy's face. Medications were adjusted. Eve celebrated, but her numbers kept plummeting. Maeve stood frozen at the foot of the bed as her youngest twin's lips took on a bluish hue. "We're doing everything we can," one nurse said, "but it's not working," Maeve whispered, and in that moment, after 5 days of pacing hallways, negotiating with God, and reading bedtime stories to silent children, maybe Quinn felt something inside her break. She didn't remember how she got to the chapel. She only realized she was there when she heard the door creak shut behind her. Alone, hands trembling, she collapsed onto the cold wooden pew and buried her face in her hands. "I did everything right," she said out loud to no one. "I built a life, I made a company that helps people. I saved strangers, and now I can't save my own child." The silence answered her with indifference. For a long moment she stayed that way, shoulders shaking, breath, shallow tears soaking into her palms. Then she heard the door open. Soft footsteps approached, then stopped. She didn't have to look. "Beau. I told myself if I kept walking, maybe I wouldn't hear her crying," he said gently. Mavi wiped her face, but didn't raise her head. "She's fading. I can feel it." Beau sat beside her elbows, resting on his knees. "I know that feeling. You lost her anyway." Beau nodded slowly, but she didn't leave unloved or unheard. Maybe turned toward him, eyes bloodshot. "Do you really believe it matters whether they hear music or not?" Beau didn't answer immediately. He pulled something from his coat pocket. A small frayed piece of cloth. Maybe looked closer. It was a child's hospital bracelet, the lettering worn almost smooth with time. "I kept this," he said, his voice distant, "from the night Ellie passed. When I played her lullaby she reached for my hand. Not much. Just a finger twitch. But it was hers, and I knew she wasn't afraid." He looked up at Mavi, his eyes shining, but steady. "Don't let Lucy go into the dark alone." Minutes later, they returned to room 417. The chaos had settled. The machine still beeped, but the pace was uneven, erratic. Lucy lay still, her body limp, her breath shallow. The doctors were in the corner whispering. Beau didn't speak. He stepped to the foot of Lucy's bed, pulled a chair close, and unwrapped his harmonica from the flannel cloth he kept tucked in his apron pocket. Mavi stood on the opposite side, holding Lucy's hand tightly. "You don't have to play," she said softly. Beau looked at the child. "I do," and he began. This time, the song was different. Not Hope's lullaby, something deeper, older, a melody without words, without structure, a wandering, aching tune that rose and fell like breath itself. Each note seemed to tremble in the air, vibrating against the machines, humming into Lucy's skin. Maybe closed her eyes. She imagined Lucy could hear it, not just with her ears but with something more ancient, her soul. Then something impossible happened. Lucy's hand moved. May gasped. "Beau." The machines blinked. A heartbeat stronger. The nurses rushed over. Dr. Patel pushed past them. "Heart rate is improving," a nurse cried. Maeve fell to her knees, sobbing openly now, her face buried against Lucy's side. Beau kept playing. He didn't stop until the room filled with people. Staff techs, night nurses drawn to the doorway, breathless and stunned. And in the center of it all, Lucy stirred, her lips parted. Her voice, hollow and barely audible, rasped, "Mommy." Time stopped. Mavi stood frozen. Lucy blinked up at her, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. Then, with great effort, Lucy smiled. Mavi collapsed onto the bed, hugging her daughter gently as though holding something made of glass and miracles. Behind her, the harmonica fell silent. Bea stood quietly, placing the instrument back in its cloth. No one moved, no one spoke until Dr. Patel turned to him and said quietly, "I don't know what just happened, but we all saw it." Beau didn't answer. He just looked at Mavi. She was cradling both girls now, one in each arm, and through her tears, she looked up at Beau and whispered the words he never thought he'd hear again. "Thank you for not giving up." For the first time in 6 days, Mavi Quinn slept. It wasn't deep, and it wasn't long, no longer than the hours between nurse rounds and the rustle of breakfast trays. But it was real, a sleep without the fear that something would end. While her eyes were closed, a sleep born from the sound of her daughter's voice calling mommy in a room once filled only with beeping and breathlessness. When she woke, the morning light filtering through the window made Lucy's eyelashes shimmer like frost-catching sunlight. Mavi held her breath, waiting for the illusion to vanish. But Lucy stirred just slightly and her fingers closed weakly around Mavi's thumb. Reality had never felt more miraculous. Beau Callahan wasn't there when she awoke. No harmonica, no quiet presence in the corner, just the lingering warmth of what had happened the night before. Nurses buzzed with unspoken joy. Dr. Patel checked Lucy's vitals 3 times just to be sure. A therapist was scheduled. Physical therapy, nutrition planning, the usual chain reaction of science reasserting itself once magic had made the first move. But Mavi's thoughts were elsewhere. She asked Brenda quietly, "Did he go home?" Brenda shook her head. "Beau doesn't have a home. Far as I know, he's got a cot in the basement near storage." Hospital lets him sleep there when he works doubles. I paused. He's been here all week. Brenda nodded. Longer than that, ma'am. You just didn't notice. Maybe found him that afternoon in the hospital garden. A small hidden space near the rear of the building where staff sometimes escaped to smoke or breathe. Bo wasn't smoking. He was sitting on a stone bench, his sleeves rolled up, polishing the silver harmonica with a scrap of flannel. She stood there for a few seconds before saying anything. Just watching him, the way his hands moved with quiet care, the way the wind rustled his hair like it was something sacred. You disappeared, she said softly. I figured they didn't need me anymore. You figured wrong. Bo looked up. She's better. Yes, because of you. He shook his head because she wasn't ready to go. I just gave her something to hold on to. Maybe walked closer. Took a seat beside him. How did you learn to do that? The way you sit, the way you listen. B smirked slightly. The Marines taught me how to take orders. Life taught me how to shut up and pay attention. That's a rare skill, she murmured. It shouldn't be. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mavi reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The sheet music Bo had written now slightly crinkled and worn at the edges. I've been adding to it, she said. Just a few lines at night. Bo unfolded the paper carefully. In the margin beneath his neat pencil markings were additions in softer ink. Her handwriting. Let her rise when the silence is loud. Let her dance when the world forgets how. Let her laugh. Let her sing. Let her fall into spring. Let her be more than surviving. Let her live. B stared at the words for a long time. Then said, you write like someone who's finally remembering what it feels like to be alive. V exhaled. I didn't expect to feel this again, joy or hope. Or she didn't finish the sentence. Bo didn't ask her to. That evening, as the sun dropped low behind the glass towers of downtown, Mevi returned to room 417 with a fresh change of clothes, a gentle smile, and a small Bluetooth speaker tucked under her arm. Laya was sitting up in bed now, coloring with shaky fingers. Lucy had begun whispering back when spoken to, just one or two words at a time, but they were hers. Mavi placed the speaker between the beds, tapped a button, and pressed play. Hope's lullaby filled the room, the same tune B had played. But this version was different, softer, smoother, played on a grand piano with light strings woven in like memories catching the breeze. The girls looked up, surprised. MV sat between them and whispered, this is our song now. Later she returned to the garden. B was there again, waiting. She handed him a cup of coffee and sat beside him, her posture less guarded than before. Do you think people like us? She asked. The ones who've lost more than they could carry. Do we ever actually heal? Bo looked at the horizon, then back at her. I don't think we heal. I think we rebuild. We carry it better. Maybe we learn how to sing through it. Maeve nodded slowly. I've spent my whole life trying not to need anyone. Bo gave her a kind look. How's that been working out for you? She smiled. You're annoying when you say things I know are true. That's my sacred gift, he said with a wink. She laughed, a real unfiltered laugh. The kind that startled her with how loud it was, how alive. For a moment she forgot she was the CEO of anything. Forgot she was supposed to have all the answers. Forgot the press, the profits, the polished life she built like armor. For a moment, she was just movie. And Bao was just the man who'd reminded her how to feel again. It started with a nurse's post on social media, a harmless photo, or so it seemed at the time, of a janitor sitting at the foot of a hospital bed holding a harmonica. The caption read, he plays every night. Then the girl opened her eyes. No explanation, just music. By the next morning, it had been shared over 12,000 times, and by noon the hospital lobby was filled with reporters. Maybe Quinn hadn't even brushed her hair yet when the first journalist from a local news affiliate cornered her in the hallway. Miss Quinn, can you confirm that your daughters made a miraculous recovery after a janitor played music to them? She blinked, still groggy. I'm sorry, what we have sources saying that the children were non-responsive until he played. Some are calling him the healing janitor. Are you prepared to comment? Mavi's voice dropped cold. Back away from my family now. Security arrived within minutes and began clearing the halls, but the damage was done. Within hours, every major outlet had the story, and Bao Callahan, the man who had quietly carried his grief through hospital corridors, became the center of something he never asked for. By evening, Sacred Gift and Diane's healing janitor were trending across multiple platforms. Some headlines were reverent, from mob to miracle, how a former soldier saved EO's daughters. Others bordered on cruel, desperate CEO turns to janitor for medical cure. And others were just curious, music and medicine. Could there be a scientific link? B stayed quiet, but he stopped playing. Maybe found him in the stairwell the following night, his harmonica in his hand, but untouched. I should have seen this coming, he muttered, eyes fixed on the wall. This wasn't your fault, she replied. You didn't ask for any of this. He looked at her, expression calm but wounded. They're not looking for truth. Maybe they're looking for spectacle. You were just helping two little girls. No, he said quietly. I was helping myself too. He paused. When Ellie died, I stopped being a father. When Rachel followed her, I stopped being a husband. And when the military retired me out with a back injury and a folded flag, I stopped being anything at all. Maybe said nothing. Bo continued, voice rough. But when Lucy smiled and Leia laughed again, I felt something I haven't felt in 10 years. Like maybe I was allowed to care again. And now they want to turn it into a circus. She took a step closer. Then don't let them. He looked at her uncertain. She reached out and gently placed her hand over his. You matter, Bo, not because of a viral post, but because you stayed when no one else knew how. Because you listened and because your presence saved more than my daughters. He swallowed hard. What else did I say? Mvi's voice was nearly a whisper. Meet at night. She invited him to dinner. Nothing formal, just cafeteria soup and 2 plastic trays balanced on their knees, sitting on the couch in the parents' lounge. But to Mace, it felt like the first real meal she'd shared with someone in years. He told her stories about basic training, about Ellie's obsession with frogs, about how his wife used to sneak into school plays dressed like a stagehand just to avoid crying in public. Mavi laughed more in that hour than she had in the last 6 months. And then after a long silence she offered something in return. When I was 9, she said, I broke both my arms falling off a swing at foster care. The nurse gave me a cassette player and a single tape Elton John's Tiny Dancer. I'd listened to it for 3 straight weeks. B smiled. So you've always had a thing for music? No, she said, shaking her head. I had a thing for escape. Music just happened to be the first door I could open. She looked at him, then really looked. And you didn't just play music. You opened a door back into life. Not just for my girls, for me. But the world didn't stop moving just because something good happened. The next day, the chairman of Quintic's board called an emergency meeting. Half the media had started spinning the story as EOS break down. Investors were asking questions. Shareholders were nervous. Public relations flagged May's name as a reputational risk. At 6 p.m., she received an official email. A motion had been introduced to place her on temporary leave as acting CEO. She stared at the screen in disbelief. Her daughters were still in recovery. Her heart, for the first time in years, was finally learning how to beat again. And now the company she built with her own 2 hands was preparing to lock her out. She found Bo again just after visiting hours ended. He was outside in the garden, eyes closed, letting the autumn wind brush over him. I'm being pushed out, she said simply. He opened his eyes slowly. The company, she nodded. They think I've gone soft, that I've lost sight of what matters. Bo gave a soft chuckle. Sounds to me like you finally remembered what matters. She turned toward him. I'm not ready to lose everything. Bo stood and walked over to her. Then don't. It's not that simple. Yes it is, he said gently. They can take your title, your office, but they can't take your voice or your girls or the person you've started becoming. She stared at him. For a moment she didn't see the janitor. She saw the man who had knelt by her daughters when doctors had walked away. The man who spoke with silence more than sound. The man who carried pain, not like a burden, but like a lantern in the dark. And without thinking she reached for his hand. He took it. No words were spoken, but between them something old and sacred and quietly hopeful began to take root. The headlines were merciless. CEO turns to janitor for medical advice amidst breakdown. Quintic in crisis. Has Mavi Quinn lost touch with reality? Healing janitor is real. But so is the lawsuit. Mavi read the words in stunned silence. Her coffee cooling beside her untouched. It wasn't the rumors that hurt the most. It was the betrayal. Somewhere inside her company, someone she trusted had leaked the internal board email. The press latched on like wolves to blood. Suddenly, her entire life had been reduced to viral fodder. A brilliant CEO undone by a mop-wielding mystic. She closed the laptop and leaned back in the hospital cafeteria booth, staring blankly at the tiled ceiling. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed over her like a swarm of invisible wasps. Across from her, Brenda hesitated with a tray in hand. Should I? She asked gently. Bo forced a small smile. Sit, please. Brenda did, glancing awkwardly at the closed laptop. It's ugly out there. Ugly doesn't cover it. Mavi muttered. Brenda stirred her tea and spoke with caution. There's something you should know. Mavi looked up. Bose has been approached multiple times. Reporters, book agents, even a talk show producer. They're offering money. A lot of it. V blinked and he turned them all down. Every single one. Said his story belongs to the girls. For a moment, Mavi didn't say anything. Her chest swelled with something unfamiliar. Part sorrow and part something she wasn't ready to name. Thank you, she whispered, but not everyone was that noble. By late afternoon, the hospital administrator, under pressure from media attention and legal concerns, called Bo into a small administrative office. Mavi was not invited. He stood across from the administrator, arms folded back straight, a quiet tension in his shoulders. We've received complaints, the administrator began. Bo remained silent. Several board members feel that your presence is creating a liability. Others argue that your involvement with Ms. Quinn's family could appear coercive. Bo let out a slow breath. So which is it? I'm either a janitor who doesn't belong in the EU or I'm manipulating the CEO of a billion-dollar company. The man shifted in his chair. We're just asking you to take a leave of absence. A cooling off period. For how long? Indefinitely. Bo nodded slowly. And what happens to my cot in the basement? The man hesitated. It's no longer appropriate. Bo stared at him. You know the irony. The only two people in that building who felt human again were the ones everyone thought were broken. The administrator didn't respond. Bo turned to leave, maybe found out later that evening by accident. Brenda had passed his mop cart in the supply wing and noticed it had been cleared out. No flannel cloth, no harmonica, no worn apron slung over the side. Just gone. MB raced to the basement. The cot had been stripped bare. A small note was left behind. Written in Bo's neat, familiar handwriting. Thank you for letting me believe again. Take care of them, Mai. They shine because of you. Her breath caught in her throat. The girls were stable now. That part was true, but a different kind of ache opened inside her, quiet, hollow, and growing fast. Like the room had lost its music. Like the heartbeat she'd only just rediscovered had fallen out of rhythm again. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window of the hospital room, watching Clea and Lucy dream beneath soft white blankets, their breathing slow and peaceful. Their cheeks were pink again, their fingers curled and relaxed, their eyelashes fluttered in dreamland. They were healing and she was breaking. She pulled out the sheet music Bo had given her, now annotated with both their handwriting, and clutched it to her chest. Then she whispered into the dark. You're wrong, Bo. They shine because of you. The next morning, she made a decision. She dressed in a charcoal gray blazer over a white blouse, tied her hair into a smooth bun, and walked into the Quidditch Tower for the first time in over a week. The boardroom was packed. Executives, legal advisors, media relations all lined up like courtroom jurors. The chairman sat at the head of the table, eyes cool and unreadable. Before we begin, he said, I want to remind you that this is a formal hearing regarding your capacity to continue serving as CEO. Maeve sat down slowly, unfolded the sheet music and laid it gently on the table. Half the room blinked in confusion. Then she began to speak. Not like a CEO defending her resume, not like a woman fighting for a title, but like a mother. She told them everything, not the version in headlines, not the sanitized per draft, the truth, the sickness, the fear, the silence and the chew, the man with the harmonica, the moment her daughters came back to life. She didn't cry, she didn't plead, she simply said, if you believe that leading a company means building walls instead of connections, silencing emotion instead of honoring it, then vote to remove me. But if you believe that we are more than numbers and quarterly reports, that we are human with the capacity to heal and to be changed by one another, then let me lead, not as I was but as I've become. The room fell silent. One by one, they turned toward the chairman. He looked at her for a long time, then closed the motion folder in front of him. We'll reconvene in 48 hours, he said. In the meantime, welcome back, Miss Quinn. Maeve walked out of the building with her heart pounding, not from fear but from something closer to truth, closer to self. And as she stepped onto the sidewalk, a breeze tugged at her sleeve. She looked up. Across the street near the alley between a laundromat and a florist stood B, back in his flannel harmonica in hand, leaning casually against the wall like he'd been there all along. She crossed to him without hesitation. You ran, she said. I thought I was protecting you. He replied. Next time, she said softly. Let me decide what I need. Bo looked down at the harmonica, then back up at her. What now? He asked. Movie smiled. Now you come back with me. He raised an eyebrow. To the hospital. No, she said, slipping her hand into his. Home. 1 year later, the world looked different. The hay room was long behind them. The beeping monitors, the dim hallways, the sterile coffee, all of it had faded into the kind of memory that no longer drew tears, but left behind a reverent silence. Like a war, you survived, but never stopped carrying. Clea and Lucy turned 7 that day. The living room at Mavy's home, once polished to the point of sterility, was now strewn with balloons, crayon drawings, half-eaten cupcakes, and glitter that would probably live in the rugs until the end of time. The twin girls ran barefoot in mismatched socks, chasing a remote-controlled puppy that barked with every flip. Mevy stood in the kitchen, frosting smudged on her cheek, smiling in a way that didn't feel foreign anymore. You sure we're not spoiling them? Bo asked, stepping beside her with 2 mugs of cocoa. They earned it, she replied. We all did. He looked at her profile softened by laughter lines that hadn't existed a year ago and nodded. Yeah, we did. After cake and chaos and more sprinkles than any child should consume. Maeve gathered the girls on the couch and reached for a small cloth-wrapped box. This, she said, her voice slightly shaky, is from B. The girls squealed in delight. Bo knelt in front of them, his flannel sleeves rolled up, a quiet nervousness in his eyes. I wanted to give you something that isn't just for today, he said, but something you can carry with you, something a little bit magic. Leia and Lucy tore into the fabric wrapping together, revealing a narrow wooden case. Inside, nestled in velvet, were 2 harmonies, 1 silver, 1 rose gold, both engraved. Clea Grace Quinn, let your song wake the world. Lucy, hope Quinn play even in the silence. The girl stared wide-eyed. Then Lucy whispered, just like yours. B smiled. Exactly. He handed them each a thin sheet of music. Simplified notes, symbols they could understand. The title at the top read, Hope's Lullaby, the Quinn twins version. Clea giggled. It's our song. Mai blinked rapidly, turning her face slightly away. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the house settled into the sweet silence of sleeping children, Mevi found Belle on the back porch gazing up at a sky littered with stars. He didn't say anything when she sat beside him. She didn't need him to. They simply breathed together, wrapped in a peace that neither of them had known how to ask for a year ago. After a long pause, Mevi broke the silence. "Did I ever tell you what happened the night after you left the hospital?" Belle glanced at her. "No." I sat beside their beds completely numb. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I just sat there. Then Lucy stirred in her sleep, rolled over and said your name. Bose's brows lifted. She said it like a sigh. Mavi continued like it was part of her dreams. Part of whatever pulled her back. Be swallowed hard. That's when I knew, Ma said. You weren't a chapter in their story. You were a turning point. He looked down at his hands. I didn't think I could still be someone's turning point. She reached for him. Her fingers intertwining with his. You are every day. And not just for them. He squeezed her hand gently. I used to think all I had left was grief. That I'd carry it forever like some kind of punishment. You still carry it, she said softly, but now it's shaped into something beautiful. He looked at her, then eyes warm and vulnerable. Thank you, he said. For what? For letting me rebuild in your world, she smiled. You didn't rebuild in my world, Bo. You helped me rebuild mine. In the weeks that followed, the harmonies became a bedtime tradition. Every night, one of the twins would sit cross-legged on the carpet, puffing clumsy, cheerful notes into their instrument, while the other giggled and tried to copy the tune. Bee taught them with patience, using colored stickers, tapping gentle rhythms on the coffee table. No pressure, just joy. Movi would watch from the doorway, hand on her heart, knowing full well that she was witnessing more than music. She was witnessing healing in its purest form. And somehow, the man who once mopped her hospital corridor now stood in her living room, lighting up the future she thought she'd lost. One night after tucking the girls in, Bee walked into the living room and found Mavi seated at the piano, the same one that had gathered dust for years. She looked up, smiling shrilly. They asked me to learn something. He raised a brow. Did they? I figured I'd give it a try. She played a few soft notes, hesitant at first, but then smoother, and Bee recognized the melody. The girl's version of Hope's lullaby. Not bad, he said, impressed. I had a good teacher, she teased. He stepped behind her, gently resting his hands on her shoulders. She stopped playing, and for a long moment, they sat in the silence that follows truth, the kind that doesn't require music because it's already humming inside you. Before bed, Mai opened the drawer of her nightstand and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a letter, not typed, handwritten, carefully folded. The top read to Bo on the day we remembered how to live. She hadn't given it to him yet, but soon she would. Because some gifts are too sacred to rush. The invitation arrived on cream cardstock with gold foil lettering and the seal of the Quintet Foundation embossed at the top. Annual Children's Health and Innovation Gala theme, the sound of healing. The keynote speaker Mavi Quinn fonded her in chair B once, then again. Then folded it carefully and slid it back into the envelope. It wasn't the kind of thing he'd ever been invited to before. Fundraisers, champagne, people in suits who'd never scrubbed a floor or carried grief in their chests like a second set of lungs. He placed the envelope on the counter and poured himself a cup of coffee, staring out the kitchen window as morning light spread across the backyard. Behind him, Mavi walked in barefoot robe, cinched loosely, her hair still tousled from sleep. They printed them early, she said with a sleepy smile. He turned. Looks fancy. It is, but it's not about that. He raised an eyebrow. Mai leaned against the counter. Serious now. This year we're doing more than raising money. We're telling the truth about what happened, about how love, music, and human connection saved two girls when medicine couldn't. Bee looked down. That's not the kind of story people like hearing from someone like me. She stepped closer. Then it's exactly the kind of story they need to hear. The weeks leading up to the gala were filled with movement. Tailor, speech writers, press managers, vendors, musicians, venue planners. But at night, everything slowed back down. Back to cocoa and harmonica lessons and bedtime stories and funny voices. Still, something lingered behind Bose's eyes. He smiled, he cooked, he fixed the broken gate in the backyard and repainted the girl's swing set. But Mavi could feel it, that quiet tug in him, that voice whispering he didn't belong in her world. That he was a man out of place in tailored suits and bright lights. She found him one night on the porch oiling his old boots. You're not coming, she said softly. He didn't deny it. I'm not made for ballrooms and stages, he said. And the last time I wore a suit, it was in front of a casket. Mavi knelt down beside him, gently taking the cloth from his hand. Then wear your boots, she said. Speak in your own voice. Show up as you. Bee stared at her. I want them to know the man who played my daughters back to life. She whispered, not as a miracle, not as a myth, as the man who stayed when everyone else left. His throat tightened, and if they laugh, she smiled. Then let them. We'll drown them out with music. The night of the gala arrived beneath a silver New York sky. The ballroom was filled with soft piano music and the linking of glasses. String lights twinkled across a canopy of sheer silk, casting a golden hue over gowns, tuxedos, and name tags from some of the most powerful institutions in healthcare. Maeve walked in wearing a midnight blue dress that flowed like it had been poured onto her. Her hair was gathered in soft curls at her shoulder. At her side, B stood in a charcoal gray jacket, no tie. His boots polished, but unchanged. He looked like himself, just seen when they entered the room. Paused, not out of mockery, not surprise, but reverence. The presentation began with a short film footage of the girls in the hospital. Moments captured by staff, time-lapse of recovery and laughter, tiny harmonica notes overlaying the transitions. The final image was a still photo, Maeve asleep in a chair. Both girls curled on her lap, B sitting beside them, eyes closed. Harmonica resting in his hand. The room fell silent. Then Mai stepped onto the stage. She didn't bring a script. She didn't need one. I was trained to believe leadership means strength, control and certainty. She began. I built a company on logic and outcomes. I made hard calls. I solved problems. She paused, steadying her voice. But when my daughters fell ill, all of that fell away. I couldn't think my way through it. Couldn't negotiate, fix or outspend the silence of that hue. She looked toward B. And then a man, a janitor, a veteran. A father who knew loss more intimately than I ever had, sat outside our room and played a song. A simple melody. Over and over, she held up a folded piece of paper. The original sheet music. This lullaby didn't save them. Instead of medicine, it saved them alongside it. Because healing isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual and sometimes musical. She stepped aside and motioned toward B. At first, he didn't move. Then Lucy's voice rang from the front row. You promised you'd play laughter. Swept the room warm and light. B stood slowly, pulled the harmonica from his pocket and walked toward the mic. He cleared his throat, then raised the instrument to his lips and played. Hope's lullaby floated across the room, soft and haunting and full of life. People stilled, eyes closed. Some wept quietly, and when the last note faded, the applause rose, not loud but long, not theatrical but heartfelt. B stepped down, cheeks slightly flushed, and returned to Maeve's side. She took his hand, and in that moment, with her daughters clapping in the front row, their futures bright, their past still present, but softened, she knew this was not the end. This was the awakening. 3 months after the gala, spring arrived in upstate New York like a whispered apology. The snow receded gently, as if it knew it had overstayed its welcome. Trees began to remember how to be green again, and in a small clearing behind a modest community center in Hudson Valley, a quiet miracle unfolded, one that no journalist covered, one that no viral clip captured. It didn't need a camera because it wasn't meant for the world. It was meant for healing. The community center stood where an abandoned library used to be, red brick wide windows and now a weathered sign that read The Melody Room, a free music and healing space for children, founded by the Quinn Foundation program director Bo Callahan. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves of harmonicas, ukuleles, hand drums, and beginner pianos. There were no grades, no auditions, no expectations, only sound and silence, and the spaces in between where children learned to feel again. Some were sick, some were grieving, some had seen too much, too young. And yet in this room, they played because of those things. One morning, Bo stood before a half circle of children with wide eyes and sticky fingers, holding up a harmonica in each hand. These, he said, aren't just instruments. He waited. They're keys, not for doors, but for hearts. Lucy and Clea sat cross-legged in the front row, now full-fledged junior teachers, proudly demonstrating finger positions to a new student who hadn't smiled all week. Behind them, Maeve watched quietly from the doorway. She didn't wear a suit anymore, not unless the cause called for it. These days, she preferred rolled-up sleeves, hair pulled back, and hands that weren't afraid to get messy. She had built empires from code and contracts. But this was the first time she felt like she was building legacy. That afternoon, while the girls stayed behind to help sanitize instruments and be answered questions from a social worker, Maeve sat alone on the old wooden bench in the back garden. In her hands was a small box, velvet covered, tied with a silk ribbon. Inside it, a necklace, a simple gold pendant in the shape of a music note engraved with the initials E.L.E. Callahan. The girl Maeve had never met, but somehow felt like she'd always known. When Bo joined her outside, he sat beside her without a word. The sunlight danced between the trees above them, casting shifting patterns on the grass. I hope she would have liked this place, Maeve said softly. B stared out at the clearing. She would have loved it. She was always humming, even when she was sick. She said music made her chest feel bigger, like it could hold more sky. MV pressed the box into his hand. I had this made for her, for you, for all of this. Bo opened it, swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to, she whispered. Just promise you'll keep playing. He nodded, eyes damp, always. That evening, after locking up the center and tucking the twins into bed with a new harmonica duet, slightly out of tune, but full of soul, Maeve and B returned to the back porch of the house they now shared. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't oceanfront or glass-walled or on the cover of any magazine. But it had everything that mattered. A front door that opened to laughter. A table that remembered every shared meal. Walls that held music, grief, healing, and now love. Maeve curled into Bo's side, his arm wrapped gently around her. For a while they didn't speak. The stars came out. The world slowed. And in the silence, Vi finally asked the question she'd carried for a year. Do you think we were meant to find each other, or do you think we only did because everything broke? Bo didn't answer right away. He tilted his head back, watching the constellations slowly rearrange themselves above them. Then he said, I think some people only meet at the edge of things, when they've lost enough to recognize what matters, when they've been quiet long enough to hear something sacred. He paused. And I think the broken parts of us, they didn't keep us from loving. They're the reason we knew how. Inside, a wind chime stirred soft and slow. It wasn't hung by the door for decoration. It had belonged to Bose's daughter once. Found again after years in a box, now given a new place not to mourn, but to remember. Its gentle tones drifted through the house, a harmony made of air and time. And I whispered that sound, it feels like her. Bo nodded. Maybe it is. In the quiet that followed, something unspoken was understood. That grief when shared becomes light enough to carry. That music when offered in love becomes a bridge across pain. That healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without breaking. 6 months later, Hope's lullaby was recorded, led by Lucy and Klaya, now 8 brave and confident. Giggling through most of the takes and uploaded to a small YouTube channel Belle had helped them start. The video didn't go viral, but it didn't have to, because one day a mother in a hospital on the other side of the country would play it for her child. Desperate and tired, and the child would blink once, then twice, then smile. And in that small moment, the lullaby would do exactly what it was made for. Not to change the world, but to remind it that it could still be changed. There are things science can't explain, but love, kindness, and a melody born from a broken heart. They can reach places medicine cannot, and maybe, just maybe, it's only the ones who've shattered, who truly know how to heal others. Before you go, we'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Whether you're in a quiet town, a busy city, or somewhere in between, your presence here means the world to us. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all that kindness still matters. Thank you for spending this time with us. Truly, until next time, take care of yourself and each